ever seen, when he's laughing, when he's delirious. He put his all into it. And I think it's kind of shitty of Friedkin to like talk about how much he wanted McQueen when Scheider, I think he's perfect in this movie. He just didn't bring in audiences. But I kind of hate the slight.
Oh no, I agree. Honestly, it's a solid performance, and I honestly just I don't know. I mean, I would have liked to see McQueen in it. I think it would have been a different movie, but then again, I think it would have taken away from the overall theme. I don't think McQueen could have played an anti-hero like that. I mean, McQueen plays hero. McQueen plays heroes, and Schneider, he wasn't a good guy. None of these guys are good guys. That's why they ended up in that small, the small Mexican town was the fact that they were all escaping the law or arrest or whatever. So I mean, these guys were not good guys, but
terrorist, investment fraud.
Fraud,
and then like a mobster.
Yeah. It just. Oh, by the way, more tidbits. Friedkin actually hired, according to his biography.
I know you're going.
He actually hired a arsonist.
Yeah, because the stunt guy couldn't do it.
Because his actual production crew couldn't blow that tree stump. They tried, and it just went like poof, poof. And so he was frustrated as hell. So he calls a guy in Queens, of all things, that's an actual arsonist called Mr. Torch, and hires him and comes down here, and the guy literally blows it up in one day and then flies back home. It's even that scene, that robbery scene where they rob the church, that apparently he had talked to an actual mobster, and that was a real event. That happened. In this real mobster's life. And so he was telling him the story, and Friedkin copied that. So, I mean, there's some like real life, mobster story backgrounds that are, kind of tossed into this movie on that. But,
do you think they got him at the end? Do you think the two mobsters came in?
The one thing I noticed this morning when I rewatched it, the look on his face, on Roy Scheider's face, he was already dead. Yeah. I mean, he was dead and he didn't know it. Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing I brought out of the very end with that close up of his face. I went, he's dead and he doesn't know it. Yeah. And so, to not give anything away, but they don't show it, but he didn't get out of there. I mean, that was the whole, everybody basically was doomed to die. So, the Q&A. So I went with a dear friend of mine, and John Schooley, and he and I would go to these showings at the Alamo Drafthouse, and I've been such a big fan of this movie and even Friedkin that I had to go. And of course, it was a sellout event, and it was held at the Alamo Drafthouse Ritz in downtown Austin. By the way, folks, I'm here in lovely Austin, Texas. So it was a sold out crowd, and you had Tim League, who's the CEO of Alamo Drafthouse, do the Q&A, and so. At the end of the movie, he comes out and they talk about the film. And I think one of the things that Friedkin asked the audience was, who has seen this film before? And I think my friend John and I were the only people that raised our hands. The whole class, or the whole place, was filled, I think, with University of Texas film students and fans maybe of his other movies. But there was a handful of people that raised their hands saying that yes, they've seen this movie before. And I was shocked. And then I realized, okay, this isn't The Exorcist. This isn't French Connection. It's one of his lesser known films. But I was just shocked at the film community. Nobody had really seen this movie. And he fought, by the way, for this remastering and getting the rights to put it back out in Blu-ray, because he had said all the other recording or all the other copies of it were not the copies that he liked.
The DVD release was just kind of crapped out.
Yeah, but he apparently, I mean, to add insult to injury, I mean, he had to fight with Universal and Paramount just to get this thing, because he wanted to know who owned the rights. Nobody knew who the rights were, because apparently Universal, the rights were over after 25 years. It turns out that, they weren't playing ball with them, and he wanted to know who actually owns the rights, because he wanted to get into this situation of remastering it and getting it back out there to the public, and he finally won. But again, it was just, like an ongoing cursed process of this movie that, that lingered with him even after it was made. But getting back to the Q&A, it was brilliant. I mean, it was great to hear his words and how this movie was made. But he admits during the Q&A that he was a cocky bastard, and that people should have died. Literally, he said people should have died, and he wasn't concerned. At least in my feeling, he wasn't concerned about the safety. He just had to get the shot.
Yeah, it didn't look like it at all. But that's why it holds up, right?
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, that was controlled chaos. That bridge scene. The trucks were bolted down. I mean, that whole thing was a marvel as far as Hollywood magic. I mean, it looks like it's going to disintegrate, in seconds. But it was brilliantly done. But even at that point, he admits that this thing, people should have died. And that's what makes this thing it looks gut-wrenching. I don't know how they shot it. I really don't.
I got to say, I've watched a lot of movies where I hate the rain in it because you'll see a rain machine, but it's only raining in a 20-foot radius. And then you can tell in the background.
The sky is still not light.
Yeah, and there's no rain 20 feet around. But in these scenes that they shot, and they went through 2 DPs on this movie as well.
Yeah.
The first guy lost confidence, and then they brought in the other guy. And, the other guy just brought in reflectors to make more light. He actually made pretty simple choices to make it look better.
The first guy messed up. They were using natural light, and the jungle was dark, and it wasn't picking up on the film. So they had to bring it in and redo it. But, again, part of the jinx of this movie. But, yeah, I mean, I'm amazed it happened, but it was just, oh God. I mean, that the whole thing works. I mean, like I said, folks, if you haven't seen this movie, the first 20 minutes are going to be a little slow just to get backstories, but God, this thing picks up and you're just on the edge of your seat just going, these guys should have died. Well, in real life, I mean, it was just, it was tremendous. I mean, it literally is one of the top 10 movies of my pick on that. But,
I mean, there were a few people who Ebert was into it back in the day, but then I think it just disappeared so quickly. People just sort of didn't have the chance to watch it.
Yeah, he got creamed in the reviews. I mean, literally just. He in his autobiographies he claims he put on his bathrobe, walked down the driveway, and the press was out there, and he picked up the newspaper, to read the reviews, and literally by the time he got to his doorstep, it was, his face was just ashen. I mean, they were just crucifying him in the press, and I don't know that it was fair, but yeah, there were a handful of people there with it. It's a great American film. I mean, as far as in retrospect, it's kind of sad that people are, coming into it now and saying that it's one of his best films. But at the time, man, as a filmmaker, that must have been a gut punch, man.
I'm not comparing these films to it, but if you look at recent cases such as maybe A Waterworld, A Lone Ranger, or John Carter, those movies were heavily disliked before they came out. Because remember, the only narrative around them was the budget, how expensive it was, how practical they were. Not John Carter, but Waterworld
I don't think they knew how to market this. I mean, Sorcerer, William Friedkin, they thought Exorcist. Okay, it's going to be another scary movie, and it wasn't. By the way, the name Sorcerer, did you read? It came from Miles.
Yeah, Miles Davis. Yeah.
He was listening to Miles Davis at that time, and Miles Davis' album Sorcerer, and that's where the name came from. And of course, he picked up on the trucks when he was in, I guess, the Dominican Republic. People were painting names on their trucks, and he picked up on that. So that was kind of an interesting piece as far as, the name on that. But
what's kind of funny too is I don't know if this happened during your Q&A, but people were like, yeah, so why'd you name it Sorcerer? And why didn't you name it Wages of Fear? And Friedkin went on a 10-minute thing. He's like, listen, Hamlet has been performed millions of times. Yeah. Each version of Hamlet is an adaptation. It's a book adaptation. Wages of Fear was a book adaptation. Wages of Fear studies the characters. I mean, it dives them in there. There is a female love interest in that. They don't have the backstories in Wages of Fear. So that movie's more about kind of like the human condition. But in this one, Sorcerer, it's completely different. You have the 4 vignettes, and then the characters are more blank slates with an overarching theme of fate, and these people are doomed, and kind of a mood and suspense. So he went on this long thing, Dave, and he got kind of annoyed but he was cool about it. But he's like Hamlet can be made 70 times. It's not a remake. It's a different adaptation. He's like, the Psycho remake was a remake because it was shot for shot. He's like, I'm really tired of this being called a remake. I mean, do you think that's fair, or do you think in our culture though, that's just what we say? Like, it's a remake. Like, it's not anything personal. But I mean, do you agree with him there?
Yeah. I watched Wages of Fear. It's a different film, but it's one of those things that people have. Let's take for example, you're gonna have you're remaking Dune. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's going to be somebody's interpretation of the novel. It may be a reimagination, but it's going to be a different movie than probably what was filmed.
Yeah.
This was the same thing. I mean, it's his take on, you're right, on the book, not so much the movie. But if I'm not mistaken, didn't he dedicate this film to the director of Wages of Fear? I think he did.
That's what I like about Friedkin, man. He makes some weird choices.
He went to the director of this Wages of Fear and told him what he was doing and wanted his blessing, which, nowadays nobody would do that. I mean, really, they wouldn't care, but he wanted his blessing, I guess. And if I'm not mistaken, he said he wanted to give him some of the profits, which there wasn't. This film cost $20 million, and I don't think it's ever recouped.
And it just ballooned, man, because all those days waiting and moving and like that's crew sitting around in rental gear. I mean, that's
the sad thing, going back to his career just getting pummeled after this. Universal dropped him. I mean, they dropped the deal with him, and he didn't have anything lined up, I think, until, if I'm not mistaken, in his autobiography, Al Pacino called him, and Al Pacino was hot, in '77.
Yeah.
And asked him to direct Born on the 4th of July, which Tom Cruise got. And Oliver Stone was the writer originally on that movie with Al Pacino supposedly playing the lead. And they wanted Friedkin to direct it. And Friedkin said yes, but it took so long to get it together that he ended up taking, I think it was the Brinks job, his next movie.
I think so.
I think the Brinks job. And so he ended up having to take the Brinks job, I guess, to, because he needed
keep money in his pocket.
Well, I mean, he wanted to work, and he couldn't wait much longer. But of course, Born on the 4th of July was eventually, he admits Oliver Stone, did a good job with it, and he earned it. But that would have been his next movie, with Pacino, had that not fallen through. But
I'm happy he came back a little bit with To Live and Let Die, and then I also love Killer Joe. I think Killer Joe is a fantastic movie, and Bug to a certain extent. So I'm glad his career didn't die there, because he's had some solid pictures since then, which makes me happy.
Well, let me give you my speaking of solid pictures. The Exorcist is. I'm not a big horror fan, and to this day, I know, our buddy John is a big horror fan. I'm not a huge horror fan, but man, The Exorcist, when I saw that scared the bejesus out of me. But here's my story. When it came out in 73?
Yep.
I took a girl on a first date to see The Exorcist.
Oh no.
About 20 minutes into the movie, she turned to me and said, "Don't ever call me again," and got up and
oh man.
She left me in a theater, and I just kind of went, okay, and stayed and watched the rest of the movie. But literally, she said, "Don't ever call me again." So yeah, that's my Exorcist story. It ruined my love life, but I was determined to watch it through. But man, I'll tell you, that scared the bejesus out of me but because it wasn't as it was more, it could happen. It's not like a monster, lurking in a closet. It's like, this is.
Boris Karloff running around.
Yeah, and it's not a Frankenstein in the corner. It was legitimate, at that time. But he's had. I mean, God,
those are some good years if you think about it. 73 for Exorcist, 75 for Jaws. I'm going to jump ahead 5 years because I know there's more in between, Rosemary's Baby and some of the other ones. But then I'm just going to jump up to the Shining. I think some of my favorite horror movies were made by.
Yeah.
By people who didn't care about horror pictures.
Yeah, so I like The Omen. The Omen was done really well too.
Yeah, that was Donner. So you have these guys who they're not exactly into making horror movies. They went in and they took horror properties and made films, and then through that process they became scary. And Rosemary's Baby to a certain extent. Absolutely, Rosemary's Baby. I think some of the best horror movies were made by non-horror directors.
Yeah, no, that was a very creepy movie. Very creepy on that.